like any event, none of this could happen without a lot of support and a lot of folks that help us out. So Marie's and her team, thank you very much for all the stuff that you've done. Of course, Sarah, for letting us do it. But really, our sponsors is really what we're focused on as well today. And our presenting sponsor, BevSource, our inspiring sponsors, the Minneapolis Foundation and Rise and Shine Partners, our Empower sponsors, which is PNC Bank, and then of course our innovating sponsors, which is Highway Credit and CNA. We're excited and appreciate all the opportunities that they've given us to run this for the next 8 months, and we're really excited to do some really cool things with it. So with that, I'm going to roll right into some introductions. I'm just going to read these so it'll sound like I'm reading it, because I am. First and foremost, Clark Sanders. And I love her bio. I will not do it justice, but I'm going to read it like I'm her. Unapologetically authentic, yes. She's just used 2 buzzwords in a row that is how others describe her, and I would be one of those others. Her don't give a blank attitude has been born and raised in Minnesota in an interesting experience. As a second-generation college student and teacher's daughter, higher education was an expectation in her family. She attended South Dakota State University and graduated in 2017 with a degree in advertising and an emphasis in public relations, minor in marketing, and graphic design certificate. Once she moved back from college, she began her career in corporate as a social media strategist and content designer. Her good friend, Kiana Sine, and she both noticed the main reason Black businesses were failing was a lack of awareness and communication from the business and service of products. To sum it up, they created a branding and marketing agency for BIPOC businesses by BIPOC creatives and strategists in 2018. Not only to continue to feed the community that she feels seen at the table instead of brushed aside, or the feeling of inferiority or arrogance, she tends to take place in the creative realm. I apologize for that, but as a Rolling Stone, Clark loves the opportunity to work with hungry BIPOC creatives, business owners in the near-ending hustle that is life. With impact and energy being her core values, Clark believes there are not enough joyful, beautiful, and accessible things in this world, so she loves bringing her creative, problem-solving mind and brain to the table. Please allow me to introduce again, Clark Sanders. I love that. Georgia Fork. Georgia is a 2-time Emmy-nominated independent journalist who is changing the narrative through visual stories about race and culture that build equity. She was one of the 2 reporters in the courtroom for the sentencing of Derek Chauvin, the former officer who murdered George Floyd. Her reporting has been published on ABC, NBC, Fox, and CBS affiliates. Most recently, she produced a short documentary, George Floyd, It Happened Here, and co-directed and edited award-winning documentary, Rondo, Beyond the Pavement, which is now available on Amazon Prime. She worked on documentaries published by PBS, Frontline, and NBC Universal. The Minnesota native has over a decade of broadcast experience, graduated from the University of St. Thomas, where she advocated for student parents, and diversity inclusion. She has 3 daughters and is married to a boxing gym owner and professional boxer, Mauricio Fort. The pair also partnered in a philanthropic endeavor through their nonprofit Fight for Your Dreams. Again, George Fort. Last but not least, Mike Jackson. Mike is the founder and CEO of Black Tech Talent and Twin Cities organizer for Blacks in Technology. Mike is one of Minnesota's own upcoming tech gurus, and Black Tech Talent has changed the demographic landscape of the tech industry. Black Tech Talent is an online platform designed for scouting, onboarding, hiring, and providing resources to Black people interested in or working in tech. Recently, given the Inclusion Evolution Award from the Minnesota Startup Awards in 2020, Mike's goal through Black Tech Talent is to provide a pipeline that will allow Black people to connect, find resources, and perhaps most importantly, find paid jobs and opportunities in the tech field. Jackson's culturally specific objectives allow Black Tech Talent to stand in a class of its own and create a real positive impact in the Black community. Black Tech Talent wants to educate more Black people to understand that success and career in tech is not only possible, but easier to obtain than one might think. Mike. These three are really exciting. I'm actually really excited. Like I told them earlier, I've been much like Minnie. I've been sort of stalking them online. I've met them through people, and it's been exciting to get in front of them today. So today we're going to make it real conversational and keep it conversational. So I want to start off and spark some conversations, starting with Clark here, and just tell us a little bit about why you decided to jump into the field of content marketing or content creation, and how did you get into it, and why do you stay in it?
Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. I haven't talked into this yet, so bear with me. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad you could join us. So I initially ended up going into like advertising, getting my degree in PR and all that, the fancy, my mom's favorite party trick is to try to say it all in one breath. I actually wanted to be a veterinarian growing up, and I had a college career resource counselor tell me I talk a lot, and so marketing would probably be a good idea, and because chemistry and math is hard. So she actually was like the inspiration for me to all of a sudden be like, well, as I'm like sobbing in her office, like, what's that? Because in my house, like, you're an educator or you help people find jobs. That's what both my parents do. So I checked it out. I ended up going out to South Dakota State. I had chosen that school because they have a great veterinary undergrad. And so naturally I just switched over to marketing and went in their department, and they're like, if you're bad at math, you're in the right place. And I was like, great. So I kind of ended up getting thrown into it, I won't lie. A little bit was with ageism with social media. It was kind of like coming out of college. It was the first time it was used as a career like that. I was one of the first classes to even have like social media classes where we're talking about strategy and how content works and how we can actually like use it for money and like that kind of stuff. So coming right out of college, I was like, well, naturally I'm gonna get a job. So went into work at good old Target. It was fantastic. I learned a lot. Not my place. Still to this day, I tell everybody in conversation, I envy people who work there because I miss that paycheck. But I decided I had so many side projects going on with my friends, and most of them had some really great ideas, especially as young entrepreneurs, as people that wanted to see something that wasn't necessarily reflected in their community, maybe just yet, or for a multitude of reasons, right? And their biggest problem was they weren't really sure how to get it into market or how to talk about it. And so my friend and I, Kiana, as Carl had mentioned, we both were working at she was working at a small social media agency at the time, and I was working at Target Corp on their social team. And we were like, why don't we just do this as a side hustle? Like, this is what everybody's side hustles now, let's do it. And where the name came from, Hustle LLC. And so we just really started supporting our friends that were in a lot of spaces, like I'm sure a lot of us, is like we wanted to see our friends do well, we wanted to see ourselves do things we were actually passionate about, not just making money for somebody else. And so we started doing that, and then I was like, this is cool, let's do it all the time. So I'm still here. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Georgia, how'd you get started?
Well, I started actually in mainstream media. I started in radio, did radio for about 7 years, which was challenging in Minnesota because this was at a time when B96 was around and they reformatted. And so after college, I was looking for career opportunities outside of where I started, which was KMOJ Radio. And there just was no other, at that time, Black or urban focused stations. And so I had to look outside of this market and went to Georgia for a few years, which was a great career move for me because I was actually able to transition into news. And so by the time I came back to Minnesota, I was hired as a news anchor in Duluth, which was a ton of fun. It was my dream job. And then I guess you could say, kind of life happened. Me and my husband expecting a baby, I gave birth 11 months into my contract, and I wasn't eligible for maternity leave under FMLA. So I was out of a job, and I was really optimistic though. I was oddly optimistic. I thought that I would be able to be hired here in the Twin Cities. I thought we needed more representation. By this point, I had 10 years of experience and 2 Emmy nominations. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to get hired. I did interview at every station. I was told I didn't have enough experience. And what I learned between that moment of realizing, okay, if I stay in Minnesota, I'm not going to be able to work in my career field that I've worked in, the last 10 years. And we were definitely staying in Minnesota. I wasn't leaving again. And so the realization happened that this wasn't just happening to me, that Minnesota and really the Midwest region was struggling. 70% of professionals of color are leaving this region because they can't get hired. And so I did some work with Ray McKenzie Group, which is a local diversity, equity, and inclusion marketing firm, which is working with all of these corporations on that issue, recruitment and retention. And so I realized that this wasn't just affecting me in my industry, in the media industry, that this was happening to people of color in every career field, regardless of how much experience you have, regardless of how much education you have. Professionals of color are just not getting hired here, right? And so I did that for a while, worked with RMG, but really just started to miss telling stories. It's what I was born to do. And so one day, I think after George Floyd was murdered, I realized that I didn't need a network to be able to tell these stories, that I didn't need permission from anyone to be able to tell these stories. And quite frankly, the media industry is changing significantly because we know the next generation is not going to sit down and watch linear newscasts. They're not going to watch the 5 o'clock news like the generation before us. So there's this huge opportunity to be able to create something that is digital first, but that is also centered in BIPOC stories. And so I started on this journey of independent journalism, which is this really weird intersection of journalism and content creation. I'm not a content creator, I'm a journalist, but I also have to know how to be a content creator because everything I'm creating is going online. And so, that's kind of how I got, definitely, very different, but I never thought I would be an independent journalist. I loved working in mainstream media, but I have realized that there is a huge need for independent voices that can also examine the media industry and how it's contributing to the inequities in our society.
Thank you. And Mike.
Yeah, so for me, it's because I was always an entrepreneur, but we didn't have huge budgets. So really had to dive into understanding, marketing and really guerrilla marketing at the time. I'm 32 now, so, when I started my first company at 18, MySpace was like the hottest, Twitter was coming up. So there were no ads or anything like that. So social media was still, very young and compared to what it can do now as far as like launching careers and advertising products and things like that. So, back then we started off with like physical flyers and sticker campaigns and really, guerrilla marketing and things of that nature, trying to get traditional press, be in magazines, be in newspapers, get on radio, get on television. And so I kind of dabbled in that, and then that just drove me to become more creative at what I was doing and really understanding what grabs people's attention, whether it's the journalist or organization I'm trying to get to give me free press, or whether it's getting the people behind us to believe in what we're doing. And so at that time, people would use the term movement a lot, getting a lot of people together to believe in one thing, one idea, creating lifestyle brands, and then ultimately becoming a movement. And so I kind of come from that background of kind of hustling with very little to get a lot done, and really focusing on the psychology of what brings people into believing in what you believe, even if you're at the seed level of producing it and getting it out to the world.
Awesome. We'll stick with Mike. Just a follow-up question a little bit, talking about how you in the Black tech space, from a marketing and promoting standpoint of getting young people, how are you focused on that, and how do you do that differently than, for the sake of argument, traditional content creation of videos or things like, opportunities like that? How are you recruiting kids into tech differently?
For sure. So I'm sure everybody in here has heard that representation matters, right? And in Black culture, it's not just seeing a Black person, it's seeing a Black person you aspire to be like, somebody that you can relate to. So it's representation, but it's also relatability. And so we bring culture to a field that's usually boring, not tech, but the recruiting, the staffing side, the educational side. And so we bring the culture in, we know what people want, what they're interested in. We focus on stuff like esports, and we talk about, even through our podcast, which we use as a marketing vehicle, we talk about more so diversity and inclusion within the tech space, but interviewing interesting people. So I've interviewed people who are video game designers that are doing stuff for Oculus, and people who work for Microsoft and work on the Xbox games and things of this nature. And so I take what I already know the audience wants to hear, and then I use that kind of as the sugar in the medicine to get them interested in the content that we're creating. And then we follow up with the resources. So we want people to be able to take action against whatever it is that we put out. And it's been great so far. We've had, a lot of people reach out after checking out our content and asking, can I introduce them to the person who was interviewed, so they could ask them if they could be a mentor, or if they could interview them for their own podcast and things of that nature. So we've been able to not only create marketing and representation for our company and myself as a CEO, but for the people that we've had on the platforms.
Amazing. Thank you. Clark, I have a question for you. It's on my notes here to ask you specifically. Graduating in 2017, how do you see that content creation and marketing has changed from that time to now?
I always have to remind myself I'm a baby, because inside I feel like a 60-year-old man sometimes. I love to lay at home and lay with my dog. So, oh my goodness, I was just having coffee and chatting about this, how it feels like even, education takes a little bit to match where the industry's at. But what I was learning in school did not matter. Especially just that we're at such a tech boom age, right? It's super cool. My graphic design certificate that I have is based in traditional design. We took classes and went to the Walker. I met with mostly artists. And then I was coming in from a perspective of a major that was extremely strategic. So it was really cool to have like a dual point of view there, because it ended up helping a lot going into this honestly completely new age of how to approach strategy in this social digital era. Things are popping up every other day that are new. I mean, I get notifications from Instagram and Facebook, Meta, whatever you want to call it, all the time that, something new is updating and that we have to adjust. And I always told my team, like, this is something personally, I don't do video. I don't have patience for it. I really wish I could. I wish I could sit down with Georgia and make stuff with her all day, but I do not have the patience for video. So having to adjust to that has been really interesting, especially being a generalist. We're living in a time where experts are so critical, and it's great. So sitting down as a leader and figuring out who to bring to the table has been a huge learning curve, as well as understanding a lot of these experts that are at the table, their expertise are shifting, as especially we've seen after the past year. Things are getting a lot more niche or a lot more broad, depending on who you ask. Of course, everybody's looking for unicorns that can do 3 jobs at half the salary of one person. But when coming from school, it taught me a lot about how I needed to work in teams, how I needed to understand and maybe listen as a leader, step back, understanding where my expertise can plug in with other people, less than, I hate this way, like some of the technical things. I learned a lot of that on the job, because different places do things and approach them in a little different ways. Tools that my school would have never known of, I end up using in the workforce, and I'm like, oh, I thought I was gonna have to do all that myself, and now there's just I click a button, how cool. So when it comes to the day in and day out stuff, that I didn't want to say it wasn't set up for failure by any means, but the expectation, the learning curve was a little bit different than I had anticipated. So meeting people like this would have been so amazing at that point. I have to remember I'm still young, I'm still meeting those people. Constantly reminding myself. But there are minors, like I was saying, like I was taking some of the first classes in social media that existed. There's now a social media major. There are content creators that are specifically learning how to make videos within 30 seconds or less, which is insane to think about. The quality and quantity of everything has just like increased exponentially. Everything we do is so cool, but schooling was such an important part for me to really learn me, how other people would work, that kind of thing. I hope that answers the question. Like my coffee's kicking in. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm trying to like rein in the thought here. But definitely I would encourage, especially for young folks, if you've been working in your role, it's felt really great for me even sometimes to be like, oh, I do know what I'm talking about, because I get a lot of clients that make me second guess my ability constantly. I woke up this morning and like gave myself a pep talk. So like having students that are coming in and maybe learn something from school. Like I had a young professional come in and we were talking about the core of a project of what we were working on. And for whatever reason, we just couldn't grasp the concept. And I said, hold on. Why are we doing this? And so we had to step back, and she even brought out one of her textbooks. And we just started going through it just to remind ourselves that like some of these things, we don't have to reinvent the wheel every 5 seconds. We can take that wheel and maybe drive it a little different. So yeah, that lived experience and that learned experience has been very interesting to see how that crosses over as a young professional, especially as an entrepreneur, because it can feel lonely at times. You know.
George, I wanted to follow up on something you mentioned in your first question, and that is the difference you see between content creation and digital media, and technically what you do about content creation. I'm probably one of those people that think if it's content, I'm digesting it kind of deal. But what do you see as the difference there, and how that will change media, the way folks consume it?
Absolutely. Well, I'll say, you know, my thought on that was challenged when I was accepted into this program called We the Culture by Facebook. And so to be able to work with Facebook directly for about a year and learn, you know, almost every single social media platform has a pathway to monetize. And you know, to be a journalist, but to be considered, you know, like a Black content creator, it was hard for me to discern between, okay, my journalism integrity and like cranking out content. And so I would go into these workshops with Facebook about content creation and take what did apply, but then also kind of have to push back sometimes because I can't just go and create news. You know, that's how I think some of these mainstream media outlets have sensationalized some of the things that are happening in our community. Because guess what? At 5 o'clock, whether there's news or not, you're going to get a newscast. Guess what? At 8 a.m., you know, you're going to go pick up that paper. Regardless of what happened the day before, there's going to be dozens of stories in there. And so to learn also like on the digital cycle, I don't have to crank out content. I don't have like that deadline that I have to hit. So I'm not desperate to go make a story, right? But also when you're trying to make a living, there's this intersection of, you know, what is the algorithm need in order for me to hit my revenue goal that I need in cranking out content. And so that has been a really intricate place, but like Clark said, a lot of this stuff is new. And so there is really no formula, so to say, in how to create $1 million by producing content. There's not a formula. And then also what I've learned in the journalism space, because I'm not doing DIY videos, because I'm not creating, you know, these fun TikTok dance videos, I'm out here capturing the voices of the people. Sometimes those videos are banned from monetizing because they quote unquote violate community standards. They get shadow banned, you know, so there's all of these other kind of, it feels like repressive tactics by some of these social media platforms for quote unquote content creators like me who want to tell real stories. And so that has been challenging to navigate as I have started to expand now and not just being an independent journalist, but founding my own company, Black Press, and trying to create a blueprint and pathways for other independent BIPOC media makers to be able to do this full time and to be able to do it in a way that's sustainable.
Awesome. Thank you. Mike, Black Tech Talent is an online platform designed to sort of scout and onboard folks. Young people, I assume specifically, or younger people, or can anyone be a part of that?
The whole variety.
Okay, so from that standpoint, how do you pair that what you do into someone who maybe wants a job at Google? So how do they come to you, and do you prepare them for that, or do you prepare them to be entrepreneurs and do their own thing? Sort of walk me through if I signed up to come and be a part of your program.
For sure. So with Black Tech Talent, even when we pitch it, we say that we're curating a pipeline of job opportunities, education, community, and then what we call culturally specific content. So the majority of people who come to us are coming because they are looking for a job. And what's happening is, there's still systemic oppression when it comes to, hiring practices. I think it's something like 40% of applicants with ethnic names don't even get that initial call, and then there's a high percentage of once they get the interview, they don't get the call back for the second interview or for the hire. And so this is one of many problems that's happening at that point. So with us, these companies that come to us, we vet them first, and they're companies that are specifically looking to hire Black or BIPOC employees, and they're also looking to work with us on engagement, retention, inclusivity, things of this nature. So it starts off with the corporations that we work with. They come to us, we have a consultation, and then of course, just like any other platform, they upload the job descriptions and things like that. We review them and make sure that there's none of those biases in the job descriptions and things of that nature, and let them know if there are. For example, a common practice for any industry is to, say you need this specific degree or this many years of experience. And so we always ask, are you saying that because you actually need that? Or are you saying that because that's a way you think you can weed out who's in there? Because you might have somebody that has 3 years of experience versus 5, but they're gonna work better than everyone else. One of the things I've been quoted on many times is that sometimes you look for the best of the best, and sometimes the best of the best comes from you. So if you're a great employer and you have a great management team, that certain things can always be accounted for and made up for in that process. So once that happens, we go into our community. We've built a database. We have over 4,000 members around the world in the first 15 months of launching, and then we see who's a fit, and then we have a conversation with them, see if they're open to work, what they're looking for, what salary range they're looking for, and if everything seems to be a match, then we'll start the process of making an introduction, and then we go from there.
Awesome. Perfect. Fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to throw a softball question out to each of you. Start with Georgia. Name someone or speak to someone who you follow, you admire, someone in your industry that you sort of, I wouldn't say aspire to be, but I wouldn't be mad if you were aspiring to do that.
Well, I guess there's two kind of people, or maybe three. Roland Martin, he has a huge following. He used to be in mainstream media. He just launched his own platform. He does a digital daily live show, which is really innovative when he's out in the field. The technology that he's been able to implement through live streaming in the field, I think is, there's nobody else really doing it besides mainstream media. And then there's been some controversy around Sean King, but I think he's probably the most popular independent journalist who focuses on race and culture. So I have studied what he's put out there. And then Benjamin Dixon, who actually used to work with Sean King and is now doing his own stuff online as well, and who I've collaborated with from time to time.
Awesome. Clark?
It was funny when you asked this question, I was like, oh, I'm the worst at names. And what's been really interesting is even in my research, looking at like who I aspire to be, what I want to model my ideas after, things like that, it's just now, I'm now seeing like Black women leaders in marketing spaces. And one of the first things they told me in school in marketing is they're like, get used to never showing your face. You will never get the credit you're supposed to. Like, welcome to, you're the shadow behind that makes everything move, which I'm cool with, but I'm kind of hard to miss at this point. But a couple of people, I mean, two of the people are on this panel. They I told them when they walked in, I was like, I've been stalking you like a little bit on social media. But like, we have such a cool community of folks here that are just like, honestly, doing the thing. That's the people that aspire to the most do the things. So I do have a mentor of mine. I want to give her a shout out because her name is Kelly Grady. And she was the first boss I had ever had that I had taken a day to go do a photo shoot for a total subcontract I had. I was working for a small agency in Southwest Minnesota, and I was their social media and project manager. And I left to go do a shoot like middle of the week. They knew I was going to be gone, and I came back. And she called me into her office, and I was like, oh my God, here we go, I'm so in trouble. She's like, can you shut the door, can you sit down? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, how long do I have with you now that you've actually gone out and done this on your own? And it was the first time somebody in my life had like encouraged me or even like asked me that question. And there was something I've told her this 1,010,000 times, but I thank her every time I see her, is she gave me that confidence to recognize, oh crap, I know what I'm doing. So I want to give like a huge shout out to Kelly. Otherwise, that's what I got. The only person that pops in my head is Issa Rae because of Insecure, because I need to watch that. But she's amazing, so it's, you know.
Perfect. Mike?
Yeah, I don't have anybody I necessarily want to be like. I like being me. I'm pretty cool. But there are a lot of people that, you know, pave the way for what we do, and like I said, I've been an entrepreneur for a long time, so I've been able to fuse, you know, fashion and, you know, event production and technology into what I'm doing today, which has been working really well in that combination. But for the conversation of marketing, Gary Vaynerchuk, I think he's very dope. If you don't know him, his YouTube is Gary V. And he's broken down, you know, so many different ways to create content and to just do things in a way where you don't have to be afraid of the way you create and just to go out and get started. And so early on, I kind of had the similar problem to Georgia where, you know, some of the stuff we were doing is serious, so it doesn't necessarily fit the TikTok audience, and then figuring out Snapchat when it first started and it was so quick and everything deleted quick and it like not being saved and me being more private and more introverted. And then so figuring out the balance of like putting my company out there in a culture that wants to know who's behind the company, right? While still maintaining some level of privacy. So I think Gary Vee does a good job of balancing that. Diddy is the ultimate marketer, especially in the hip hop culture. I mean, he's literally someone who could take a rock and be like, this is it, and everybody's gonna go out and buy it. Not all of his products were the best, but they still sold the most. So definitely Diddy when it comes to marketing and the way he's just created a brand around himself and everything he's touched. Jay-Z for sure, more so in the way that he moves with his business deals. He really focuses on getting the job done more than caring about necessarily public opinion, because he knows at his status he's going to get backlash for, you know, anything that he does. He did that deal for Super Bowl, and like the first one he did focused on like the Latinx community, and everybody's like, what about the Black community? It's like, it's the first one. It's in Miami. It makes sense. But he knew that was coming, and he was able to accept that pressure and take that on. And then now this one's coming up and it's got Dr. Dre and the whole community. And so remembering that as well when I'm making content, not to worry about the backlash, because we know what the bigger picture is and the message that we're trying to get across and where we're trying to go. And then on just like a closer level, like I said, I'm just inspired by a lot of different entrepreneurs that are in this ecosystem. These women up here with me, you know, I've heard about your journeys and your stories. I've watched some of your live streams during the trials and stuff like that. And so anybody that's really putting themselves out there and taking a chance. And one thing you said earlier that was really important was like permission. Everybody's waiting for permission to do what they want to do. Nobody has to give you permission, you know. It's just understanding that you're not going to come out and be Care 11 day one. That's really what people are worried about. They're like, I need this cosign, I need this logo to be where I am. Oh, I can create content, but I need to sell some fit tea so people know I'm actually popping and getting endorsements or whatever it may be. You know, we created our podcast. 4 episodes later, we had 2 paying sponsors. We didn't have a crazy amount of views or followers or anything like that, but we understood business. We understood the long game, and we were able to convey that to the people we were working with, and it ended up working out. So just any entrepreneur that's putting themselves out there and taking a chance and trying and giving themselves permission to be great and start at the bottom in order to get to the top also inspires me.
Awesome. That's a great segue to my next question for Georgia, which is, if I'm a 20-something-year-old looking to get into digital media or media in general, journalism, what's your one piece of advice you would tell that person? Man or woman, but it doesn't matter.
Be authentic. Yeah, be authentic. I think a lot of times people who are looking to get in journalism specifically, when you're BIPOC, we don't see ourselves on TV, and so we try to conform, right? For example, like I wear my hair curly now as an independent journalist because I couldn't when I worked as a TV anchor for NBC, Fox, CBS, and ABC. And so was I being authentic to myself and who I am in that moment to try to get this job, right? And so I think in order for us to really chip away at some of these inequities that we have, not just in our society, but also in media, it's going to require the next generation of professionals to be unapologetically authentic. And corporations who are ready to accept the authentic professionals that are applying. In the digital space of independent journalism, you know, if I had to give a piece of advice to people who are trying to get into independent journalism, I would say don't compromise. You know, I think it's really easy to look at the numbers. I'll have a video that earns $0, but it is a very powerful story that needs to be told. I flew all the way to DC and did a live stream in DC and 20 people watched, you know. But if I'm always driven by the numbers and not by the impact of the story, I'm going to become the entities that I'm trying to disrupt. And so for people trying to get into the independent journalism space and they're self-publishing online, I'd say don't compromise, because that's what makes independent journalists unique. Even if only 100 people saw it, you don't know who those 100 people know and who they're going to tell. And having that attitude is what also allowed me to get the victories, you know? So not every video is gonna go viral, but when I live streamed the trial, I had 5 million minutes watched between March and May. And I think at that time, I only had about 20 or 30,000 followers. And so that is also because I didn't compromise, you know, and I didn't have the technical infrastructure of a Care 11 or a Fox 9. You know, we were trying to figure out how do we cut between the court feed live stream and then cut to a live shot outside, which happens seamlessly every day on the news. But when you're a small entity, you have a limited budget, you have limited equipment, that is a huge technical hurdle to try to jump over. But we didn't compromise, and we had some failures, but we also had some successes. And so in order for us to really be authentic and be original, we can't compromise.
And Clark, there's anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I loved that. I've been struggling with my team, especially as of late, as we're kind of picking back up and the world feels like we can be a little bit more optimistic and our clients are getting a little bit more funding, so we get more projects. We've been struggling with that quality over quantity. When I started, and even the things that I love about marketing and content creation is getting to sit down and be really smart with it. And that doesn't always get to take place now. I've even brought on people on my team because I already know I like to take too much time, not video amount of time, but I like to take a lot of time to really think through, because I've labeled myself and my team has labeled myself as the human troll. I will find every single way that something could be read wrong and try to be ready to respond to that. Which is low-key, if you're kind of a cynical individual, great job. You get to kind of like let it out. But there are so many creators. There's more content created each day than has like existed in the history of content, basically. It's insane, this digital era we're at. And so we have clients that are sitting here like, well, my competitors are churning out this, or this person is doing this, and so it's super popular and all this kind of stuff. And so I have to remind clients, myself, my team even, what is the message we're trying to convey? Are we really just trying to like catch this wave? Is that what your business is about? Because that's also another way to fizzle out a conversation. If you're just joining on to all these conversations instead of speaking authentically from what it is that you want to talk about. I have a client that just recently, she owns a doll company. It's called Courage Dolls. Check it out. It's great. And the doll, the reason she created it was to have conversations about race. Actually, the doll, Aaliyah, she's 8-year-old, she's an entrepreneur from Chicago, is her story. And a big part of that is her overcoming, talking to her community about things. And so we had to have a conversation because we just did a year audit for her social content to find out where are some holes that we could be filling at this time and what has been working, what hasn't. And even just knowing moving into this video era, how we need to adapt. And we found out that education was the lowest performer of all of her content. And the education that she's providing is how to register to vote in your local community. How can Black folks proudly wear their hair when they're in spaces? How can young children feel empowered in school to have conversations that aren't there? So these are really important conversations to the community. But unfortunately, when we're looking at it and we're talking about bottom line, she's like, well, do we have to cut that? It's not performing. And I looked at her, I said, I don't care, I love it. And I know that I know that's like the golden rule as a content creator, like you're not gonna love every single piece that you put out there. But I said, this is such an important piece, let's revise how we do it instead of what it is. So we're finding and trying all these different ways. And it can be tough when we have so much access to so much content from so many different points of view, so many styles of making it, so many different ways that people, which I love, is the way that people problem solve to come up with this content. Like, whoa, you thought of doing it that way? That's insane, I could have never. And so with the quick turn of things has made, and the quantifying of a lot of stuff has made this work interesting, to say the least. Especially as business people, we still have a bottom line that we have to make. I still have to tell my clients this did successfully so they can continue working with me. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I just love your business. I love making content with you and you're dope, so let's keep doing it. But you know, that's a part of the struggle of the hustle, I would say.
Awesome. I want to sort of catch a couple things before we end up breaking a little bit, but to talk about what you have going on, right? What's next? What are you doing? What projects are you working on? So Mike, I know we spoke a little bit about something you have coming up this month. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so one of the things we do, because we're community-based, which just means that we're not transactional. We don't get people placed or not placed, and then we don't talk to them anymore, right? Our community engages with us through our podcast, through our newsletter, obviously through the different social media platforms. And then we like to produce events that help the communities in different ways. So November 20th at MCTC from 12 to 4:30, we're doing a community tech fest. It's the only, Black-focused community tech fest in Minnesota. And we're gonna have things like virtual reality, we're gonna have gaming, we're gonna have robotics, we're gonna do a hackathon and different things of that nature. So we have that coming up, we're really excited about it. We have some great sponsors and some great vendors participating with that situation. Again, that's at MCTC on November 20th. And the purpose of it was really to show the Black community different ways that technology can improve our lives, right? There are a lot of cool products out there that make financial literacy easier, that makes banking easier, that makes checking up and keeping track of your health easier. And a lot of people don't know about these things because it's not advertised to our community. And so me being in tech and meeting all these cool founders with these products, I wanted to create an environment where it felt more like a fair. Everything you see, you can touch, you can play with, you can engage with. And just to introduce, as Carl asked earlier, like how do we get in the youth as well as the young adults and the parents engaged. These are the different types of things that we do where instead of this being a panel where, you just go and people talk about their products, I told every vendor they have to do an activity. People have to be able to play with these things and feel them, and it has to feel like fun and an introduction in that manner. So we have that going on. The tagline's Imagine the Possibilities. So the conversation after that will be some of the products that we're releasing as a company. We have our employer matching app that's coming out, which operates very similarly to Tinder, but for jobs. So we streamline that process. A lot of recruiters and hiring managers, after a lot of conversations, the big companies, they know they're gonna get 1 million applicants, but now they gotta read through cover letters, they gotta read through resumes, and they gotta set up interviews and things of that nature. And so we said, well, let's take that and put that on the back end. And luckily for us, anybody who's working with us is looking for Black talent, so we don't have to do things such as hide imagery or things of that nature. They know what they're getting when they're working with this platform. So now it can feel more personable. They can see what the skill sets are, what the requirements are, mutual interest with the swipe features, things of that nature. So we'll be demoing that at the Community Tech Fest. And then we also have a secret project we've been working on that is gonna blow some minds when it comes out, and that'll be at the Tech Fest. Mayor Jacob Fry is also supposed to attend and give a little speech on how Minneapolis is approaching making sure STEM is in the Black community and things of that nature. So if anybody wants to come, just holler at me after this and I'll give you more info.
Awesome. Thank you. Georgia?
So I am currently working on a couple of documentaries, one with PBS Frontline, and also preparing for coverage on the upcoming trials. We have the trial for the officer who shot and fatally shot Dante Wright, and then both the state and federal trials for the other 3 officers charged in the death of George Floyd. Outside of that, I recently launched a photo exhibit, so photos that I've taken nationally are on display currently at Normandale College. That's accompanied by a photo book. And then just trying to expand the team, trying to find other independent voices who really want to make this a pathway. And so hiring those folks and training them through my company, Black Press.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's awesome. We don't have anything as cool and detailed as that going on, but with the new year, we get a lot of inquiries about brand development, which is low-key, they get to work with me because that's my favorite part. So we get a lot of people we have a lot of people over the pandemic that are like, I could make this idea come to life. And so we do a branding service package where we sit down and actually talk to you about what is your voice, your positioning, how does your price affect some of that stuff, give you a real critical eye into how people are consuming your brand. And then we also design and make the things, and we put together a marketing strategy for you, and it's a lot of fun. But in the new year, and I'm saying this lightly because fingers crossed, of course, with capacities, we are looking to start doing some open classes for entrepreneurs within social media space of how to use it, maybe get some high level learning you may not find everywhere else, as well as how to maybe develop a brand on your own if you're bootstrapping it and hustling with your own money out here, because we get it. So yeah, we'll be providing lots of resources in the new coming year, and I'm really excited about them. So yeah.
Awesome. Were there any questions from anyone in the audience? I forgot to even ask, I apologize. Lucille? We'll start with Lucille and then we'll come back to you.
Lucille Hanson here with Junior Achievement, he, him, his pronoun, all of this stuff. I think about how to frame it. With entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs, you constantly hear about getting started and the challenges of getting started. I know traditionally business plans are the way to go, right out the business plan, those steps and everything, but with the turn of technology and making transitions like you did, Georgia, do you think that's still the route to go? Because we also hear just get started, but then we hear develop a business plan, develop a strategy, develop a why. And so as far as advice for individuals getting started, what steps you think they should take?
Who you want to go first?
To say that was a really good question.
You can start, Mike.
Okay. It depends on what you want to go into, right? It depends on what your budget is, depends on what your team's looking like. So just get started is kind of like the fun, you're not doing it from a place of like needing an income right away. You're not doing it from a place of like desperation, but you have an idea, you have some friends or some people you want to partner with and do it. And you just start putting things together, right? So if you're doing a t-shirt company, that's something you could just get started, right? You do the design, you mock it up, you have the name, you have your logo, you put it out, you see if anybody wants to purchase anything, right? And now we live in a time where you have platforms like Shopify, you have WordPress with WooCommerce. People are more open to supporting independent and supporting local, and people are more understanding of like pre-sales and pre-orders, things of that nature. So that's something where you could literally just get started. You do the graphic design, you mock it up, get some pre-orders, take the money from the pre-orders, you go get your product, there you have it. When you think about actually putting together like a brand and like a real company, and this is something where you may foresee yourself trying to raise capital, or you want to, eventually get a loan from a bank or whatever it may be, you have to be very strategic in how you start off, because you have to understand the metrics you're going to be judged by. And one of those things is time passed for your milestones and success. So if you, just get started and you're doing things really slow, and then 2 years go by, now you're talking to an investor, they're like, well, in 2 years you only sold 100 shirts. That's not attractive, right? So it really depends on what it is. For me, most of my businesses were, kind of a just get started type of situation. And those businesses were successful, but they were still what we would consider a small business, right? And when I got to the point of getting more into technology and really thinking about scalability and like building 100 million to $1 billion brands, that's when you have to be more thoughtful in the process that you're doing. It shouldn't be crippling to start. There's a lot of things you don't need. And one thing for everybody in here to research, if you don't know, is like the MVP model, which stands for minimum viable product. And essentially it means make the most basic, affordable version of what you're trying to do and then go sell it, right? And that's kind of a more strategic version of just get started. Understand who your audience is, do the research, make the product good, but don't overdo it, don't kill yourself doing it, don't go bankrupt doing it, and just see if you can get some people to buy into it and believe in it right away. And then from there, know what your next step is, whether that's making it better once you have 100 or 1,000 customers, depending on the product, whether that's hiring a team, whether that's at that point saying, hey, look, we have 10,000 people that signed up for our email list waiting for this product based on this. And if we had 15,000 in capital, 20,000 in capital, we could actually service that. Well, then you might be able to go get a loan or an early investor or a relative to believe in you and move from that point. So don't cripple yourself in the planning stage, because ultimately the reality is most businesses don't work out. So you don't want to waste a whole bunch of time just doing over planning, and then by the time you come out, you missed a lot of things that you didn't understand. Feedback is critical from your potential customers, so even if it's rejection, it's good to know why you're getting rejected so you can recraft that by the time you're ready. But it really just depends how big you want to be and what you want to go for.
I was just gonna piggyback off of what Mike said, because yes, retweet all that. He said a keyword in there, which was research. And so I am an ooh, shiny object kind of person. Like, I'm gonna start a dog perfume, because I literally just pulled that on my butt. Like, why not? That could be a good idea. We get fun ideas a lot of times, right? And so I am also just do it, try it, see what happens. But I never do it without knowing the landscape, without knowing what else is out there. What are opportunities that maybe I could get into this field to do? Is it considering, like, is this more of something that is product-based that I would like to grow into something else? Is this more of a brand perspective? So with that, sometimes if you're building more of a brand than a business, which is like a whole thing now, people may want you to just deliver on something because they want you, or they want what you're talking about, or they want what's going on. But going back to that why and that what, there are a lot of times when I have to sit down as an entrepreneur and a business owner, because now I'm getting to a point in my career where we have to say no. And once you get to a point where you have to start saying no, going back to that why and what is extremely important. I'm talking to my team about capacities and what we have going on and what they want in their career trajectories, as well as how we can build that into Hustle's initiatives. So when we get started on something, we take that idea and we at least get a why and what. That way we can know. But yeah, if you bog yourself down with too much strategy, you can oftentimes get analysis paralysis, is what I like to call it, where you're just over analyzing and it's never gonna be perfect. You can constantly strive for perfection. I think that's something beautiful that people do, but you have to put it out there. You have to take the feedback. You gotta do what you gotta do.
I mean, I don't think there's too much more to add. I mean, I think you guys really answered that question well. I think it is a great question. And it is also a complex question. Like, there's no cookie cutter template answer to give a young person who has an idea. Because obviously you don't want to discourage them because they might have, this brilliant innovation that could change the world, right? But the reality is, business is complex. And so if you just get started and you don't have the funding, how can your idea take off, especially if it requires funding, if it requires you to scale, if it requires you to hire a team. But then also if you don't get started and you're waiting on someone to fund you, the thing that I've learned is what Mike has said is, like, especially being an entrepreneur of color, it is extremely hard to get funding from banks, for me, in my experience. And for all of the reasons Mike said, and then also just because of the color of our skin. And I feel like that is the elephant in the room when we're talking about banking, that it's not about our ideas, it's not about our credit score, sometimes it's not even about proof of concept or how long we've been in business. Kara Levin actually just did a really great investigative piece on home mortgages, like just in the last week here in Minnesota, where they found that Black people were 3 times more likely to be denied bank funding. And it could be the same debt to income ratio, same credit score. So that is the elephant in the room. Being a Black woman starting a media company, I also have to grapple with the reality that I'm in a climate where only 3% of Black women or I think it's 3% capital funds are going to Black female-owned businesses. That 3%?
That's actually the total for Black people.
3%.
I said
So that's
like 3 or 4. Yeah, it's something ridiculously low.
Black women is even lower.
So you mean to tell me that our ideas are not at the same level of par as white entrepreneurs? So it's hard to just say, don't get started until you get the funding you need, because you might not ever actually get the funding you need. And you might have to be extremely creative and figure out how to make it work on a shoestring budget. So what are your goals? what is the bare minimum, like you said, the MVP, but also being realistic about the business climate that we're in. And community partners, I think, has been the saving grace for the business endeavors I've pursued, even outside of media, where there are people in this community, there are nonprofit organizations, there are even for-profit organizations that believe in what we're doing and the impact that we're making in community, and they're willing to write a check. And a lot of times it's grant dollars that have no, deliverables attached to it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other question?
Can you hear me? So I have two questions. My first question is, how, I don't know if you've answered this, but how are you able to keep moving on even when things are really hard? How are you able to move on both to your personal life and your professional life? And then my second question is, what resources do you have for business, new startups or business owners here in the cities?
That's a great question. I can talk a little bit about mental block because I'm going through one right now, I'll be honest. Radical transparency is something we talk about at my company. So we're always talking about, like, I'm not feeling it today, guys. I might need some help. That emotional side of the labor can be tough because I know, at least for myself, the reason why I left a corporate space is because I wanted to work on things that fueled me emotionally. And it's been tricky trying to separate the business and the personal, right? A lot of it has to do with thick skin, learning and understanding that no one's out to get you. I mean, not no one, but try not to be paranoid on a panel. There are systems that are set up for us to fail. That's point blank period, they exist. When it comes to, I know, like, when we're talking about grant applications, I have a small team of us right now that are working on, like, hey, the places that we were gonna get funding from that unfortunately because of COVID and what happened are now reopening their funding. We need to get back in there. We need to be talking to them. We have to have stuff going on. But there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into it. I have a white mother, and so I talk to her a lot because she works with a lot of young entrepreneurs and a lot of entrepreneurs, and she goes, well, just go apply for that grant. And I said, well, knowing that I only have a 3 to maybe 4% chance of even getting funding, kind of a kick in the gut to get started, if you ask me. So there's a lot of, like, pessimism that you have to kind of, like, talk yourself out of. I'm a big believer in manifestation. My positive thinking and my team's positive thinking has brought us into some spaces that we never thought we would be in just because we're like, let's try it. The worst that can happen is they don't reply and they say no, right? And so having a little bit of that plan too of knowing what we want to achieve helps us as a team, and even myself as an individual, to be like, okay, maybe we missed that mark, but I have all these resources, I know all these things, I know who I can connect. I had my friend, I called him right on the phone, we're accountability buddies. I said, give me a pep talk real quick before this, like, cause that's just what I need. He's like, you know what you're talking about, you got da. And sometimes that's just what you need from your troop. And we don't always share that part, right? Like, we don't share that. I had to take a mental health day and just cry on the couch one day because I just was tired. That happens. And then I had to get dressed, show up, have the meetings, and do the things. It takes a lot of energy. If it were easy, everybody would be an entrepreneur, right? There are days I wake up every morning like, oh God, it would be so nice to be just like go to an office and do something, have somebody else tell me what to do, because you are that final decision making. That's how I have on the emotional front. Y'all probably could answer the other question a little bit better.
I think, like, the why, right?
Yeah.
If you are centered in why you're doing what you're doing, I think it becomes a lot easier to overcome any barriers or obstacles that you might face, any self-doubt, imposter syndrome. And so I think it's very important as you're entering the space of being an entrepreneur, who am I, what do I do, why do I do it? And so you can always come back to that why when you're upset, frustrated, sad, exhausted,
happy,
you feel like you failed, So yeah, I would say being centered in your why, and that changes over time, and that's fine. You evolve. And then in terms of resources, I think once you answer the who am I, what do I do, why do I do it, you can start to vision what is the next level, and then how do you get there, and start identifying community partners, start identifying people you can collaborate with, next steps, goals, and tying that to metrics. So for entrepreneurs, I think there's also a lot of programs. Like Mike and I, we went through Lunar, and he was sharing he did Beta, the Women's Foundation, Team Women if you're a woman. So there's a lot of also like programs and kind of professional development opportunities that you can tap into to help you get to that next level as an entrepreneur.
I Fund Women was one that I've worked pretty closely with that's been beneficial to my team. But there are so many, and they're popping up now as people are seeing different resources. New grants are even just like coming out because people are like, oh, I have money. Hopefully.
Yeah, I was just taking some notes. So on a realistic level, like to be an entrepreneur and really trying to join, that league of people it's a rare thing, right? A lot of people try, a lot of people don't make it. So we have to have the perspective of we're trying to join the 1%, which means you're gonna have to do a lot of things differently from the 99%, which is gonna be extremely uncomfortable because a lot of things that society teaches is incorrect. The 1%, they know that. That's why they have their fraternities and their secret clubs and just members only type conversations. So we have to have that perspective. When things get hard, we have to understand that it's supposed to be hard because it's designed to be that way, and we're trying to live a lifestyle that most people won't live. And that's not necessarily money. A lot of people aren't necessarily driven by money and extreme wealth, but to make your own schedule, to be your own boss, to command your day is still a rare function regardless of money or not. So that's one thing that's important when you go into this, is to understand it's not necessarily for people who can't function at a high level of stress, because it's extremely stressful to get there. And sometimes you may not be the CEO. You may have an idea and you're more the product, or you're more of the creative person, and you need to find a CEO or a salesperson or a tech person to be your partner to work on these things with you, that's more business oriented and can take on that stress while you do exactly what it is that you want to do. Another thing as far as mentality is like, know the difference between something that's a problem and something that's part of the process. Right? So a lot of times, even seasoned entrepreneurs, CEOs, investors, they'll be like, what's your biggest problem today? And I'd be like, I don't have problems. I have things that are in process. What do you want me to say? Funding? That's a process. I'm gonna get it, whether it's through revenue that I generate, you never fund me, whether it's through a bank because we have monthly recurring revenue where I can go get a loan. Even if I get rejected by 10 banks, maybe the 11th will approve me, right? So I have things that are in process. A problem is really something that you can't get over unless it's solved right then and there, right? Problem is you have a trucking company and your truck broke down and you don't have the funding to fix it. That's not a process. That's a problem. That's a problem, right? So understand the difference between that, so you don't overly stress yourself about something that's just part of the process that you're gonna go through. Everybody, depending on their background and their network, is gonna start differently. You'll have somebody who's popular and they could start, like I said, a t-shirt brand or an eyelash brand or whatever it may be, content creation, and instantly like things look like they're going good, and then later on that person doesn't know business. So then after you sold your first couple customers that are natural supporters, how do you get people who don't know you? And they struggle with that. And some people may be on the flip side where it takes them longer to get that momentum, but they were actually able to take the time to one-on-one understand those few customers in the beginning and then craft their product and their messaging to go for that. So that's another big thing. And then I would say, like when you're overwhelmed and you're stressed, regardless of the things I just said, because that just happens, we're human, just focus on the big picture. That's what I do. Where do you want to be? I used to, whenever something used to happen negative to me, I'd be like, it's fine, I'm gonna learn from this, because once I sit in my throne, they won't be able to knock me from it. And right before the pandemic, I had a photography studio and I had bought a throne. And this was for, maternity shoots and music videos and things of that nature. And then we had the pandemic, we had the shutdown. So it was just sitting in my office in the corner looking more like a decoration than furniture, right? And I got booked to speak to some high school kids for Genesis Works. And I'm like, oh, they'll think this is cool. And I threw the throne in there. And right after I had a ton of meetings, I didn't feel like carrying it and moving it around. So I just sat in it. Now it's at a point where if I'm not in my throne on Zoom, it's a problem with whoever I'm meeting with because they're so used to seeing it in my content and stuff. And I just sat one day and I'm like, yo, this is crazy. I sat in my throne and now I can't move from it, even if I want to. So, so I always think about like that big picture and like where you want to be in life. And then I would say to your second question, the low-hanging fruit, your second question was like resources. LinkedIn has been great for me, especially with Black Tech Talent. That's where I source the majority of my business. LinkedIn, I described to somebody the other day, LinkedIn turns corporations to people. That's how I describe it, right? You start off with something and you wish it was in Target or Best Buy, and you have no clue how to even reach out to any of those. It's not the customer service number on the website, right? And so now you go from wanting to work with these big companies to now it's Jessica in recruiting at Target, or it's Catherine in marketing at this place, and so on and so forth. So if you're not on LinkedIn and utilizing it correctly, I suggest you definitely get on LinkedIn. As George mentioned, like startup accelerators, things of this nature. Beta is a big one. I went through that program. Lunar as well. What are some other? Innovation Labs. Yeah, there's a few of them. So just go on Google and type up startup accelerators Minnesota. They're a little hard to get into. We won our division for Minnesota Cup, which is like one of the biggest entrepreneurship competitions in the country. And I think they said like 2,000 people applied this year, so to be one of the 9 winners was pretty great. But that's another one. And then I would just say just networking, just continuously networking with each other, because we all know somebody, that can get us a step closer to where we want to be. And then of course YouTube. And I feel like the biggest thing is knowing what to search. And I mentioned one big one earlier, which is MVP, minimum viable product. Like, just go and learn that methodology. Go research. There's another one called Jobs to Be Done. And that helps you kind of identify why people are buying the products they're buying or who they're buying it from. And that's super important, because then it lets you know where your competition is, and it lets you know how to refine your messaging and your brand positioning. So I would start with those, and then as you start tapping into those and those networks, more relevant opportunities will come.
I had a friend with YouTube University that she would go and listen to like big CEOs talk, or like listen to like their quarterly reports and just hear what buzzwords they were saying, and then she'd start Googling those so she could understand what the industry was actually talking about, because humans, we love our acronyms. So that's like one fun tidbit of like a way that you can pull from experts how and what to search.
Awesome. If there are no other questions, we'll start to wrap up. There's a few other things I want to do, a little bit of house cleaning. Just to, again, I want to thank our sponsors, BevSource, Minneapolis Foundation, Rise and Shine Partners, PNC Bank, Highway Credit Union, and CNA. Again, they crush it with the help they've provided with this opportunity, so we really appreciate it. Our next speaker session will be December 6th. So it'll be here, and it will be on retail consumer goods. So there's some really cool folks coming in that are doing some great things right before the holidays. So maybe bring your checkbooks and credit cards. Maybe they have something for you. I don't really know. I want to thank our panel today. Obviously, Clark and Georgia and Mike, appreciate you so much. We all will be reaching out to you in one way, shape, or form or the other. I would recommend everybody connects with them on LinkedIn. I'm hitting them up on LinkedIn all the time before I got their numbers. Now I just bombard them on text. But it's a fantastic tool, like Mike was saying. I mean, you start to see and start to build relationships with folks, and then when you have a moment like this, it allows us to start knowing people in person in a way that's just a greater, deeper meeting and connection. So truly appreciate all three of you coming in today. We're gonna spend a little bit of time, I think, sort of probably taking some pictures, I guess, or some things like that. And then we're gonna mill around a little bit. If you have any questions or concerns or questions you wanna connect with folks otherwise, they'll be here for a little while, and then we'll go from there. Again, thank you all for coming out, and have a good day.